Imagine a world where death traveled faster than armies. A world where entire cities fell silent. Not because of war, not because of famine, but because of something invisible. This is Europe in the 1300s. And this is the story of the Black Death. In the early 14th century, Europe was a dangerous place to live even before the plague arrived. Cities were overcrowded, streets were filthy, and sanitation barely existed. Waste was dumped directly into roads and rivers. Animals wandered freely through crowded marketplaces, and rats thrived in nearly every corner of urban life. Most people had no understanding of bacteria, infection, or how diseases spread. Illness was often blamed on bad smells, curses, planetary alignment, or punishment from God. Medical knowledge was primitive, and treatments were based more on superstition than science. Life expectancy was already low. Famine, war, and disease were common parts of everyday life. But nothing could prepare Europe for what was coming next. Far to the east, somewhere in Central Asia, a deadly disease had begun spreading through trade networks connecting continents. Merchant caravans traveled across the Silk Road carrying silk, spices, precious metals, and something far more dangerous: the plague. Historians believe the disease was caused by a bacterium called Times Yersinia pestis. It spread through fleas living on black rats that traveled aboard merchant ships and caravans. At first, nobody noticed. Trade continued normally. Ships crossed oceans. Markets remained crowded. Ports welcomed merchants from distant lands. And hidden inside cargo holds, the infection moved silently from one city to another. By 1347, the plague reached Europe. One of the first major outbreaks appeared in the Sicilian port city of Messina after merchant ships arrived from the Black Sea. According to historical accounts, many sailors aboard the ships were already dead or dying when they reached shore. Their bodies were covered in strange black swellings. The survivors were weak, feverish, and barely able to stand. Authorities ordered the ships removed from the harbor, but it was already too late. The disease had entered Europe. Within weeks, people across the city began developing terrifying symptoms: high fevers, chills, violent coughing, extreme exhaustion. Then came the buboes. Painful, swollen lumps formed under the arms, around the neck, and near the groin. Some grew as large as apples. The skin darkened as blood vessels burst beneath the flesh, giving the disease its infamous name, the Black Death. Victims often suffered unbearable pain before dying within days. Some coughed blood. Others experienced hallucinations or seizures. Many never even had time to say goodbye to their families. Fear spread faster than the plague itself. At first, people tried to continue normal life. Churches held prayers. Markets stayed open. Doctors attempted strange treatments involving herbs, bloodletting, or burning incense. Nothing worked. As death tolls rose, panic consumed entire cities. Families locked themselves inside their homes. Some abandoned sick relatives in desperation. Wealthy citizens fled into the countryside, hoping to escape infection, while the poor remained trapped inside crowded urban centers where the disease spread rapidly. Doctors became symbols of fear. Many wore long dark robes and bird-like masks filled with flowers or herbs. They believed pleasant smells could protect them from poisonous air known as miasma. But the masks offered little protection. The plague moved through Europe with terrifying speed. Workers collected corpses from homes while church bells echoed constantly across cities already drowning in grief. In some towns, there were not enough healthy people left to bury the dead. Entire villages vanished completely. Fields were abandoned, crops rotted where they stood, livestock wandered freely without owners. Businesses closed, trade collapsed, and food shortages spread across Europe. The smell of smoke, sickness, and decay filled the air. Many believed the apocalypse had arrived. Religious fear intensified as people searched desperately for answers. Some believed the plague was punishment for humanity's sins. Groups known as flagellants marched from town to town, whipping themselves publicly in hopes of earning God's forgiveness. Others searched for scapegoats. Foreigners, minorities, and vulnerable communities were falsely accused of poisoning wells or spreading disease intentionally. Violence erupted across parts of Europe as fear transformed into paranoia and hatred. The plague didn't just destroy bodies. It shattered trust between people. Parents abandoned children, friends avoided one another, priests refused last rites out of fear of infection. Entire communities collapsed under the psychological weight of constant death. And still, the plague continued spreading. Historians estimate that between 25 and 50 million people died in Europe alone between 1,347 and 1,351. Some estimates suggest nearly half of Europe's population disappeared within only a few years. The scale of death was almost impossible to comprehend. For survivors, life after the plague felt like living in a different world. Cities once crowded with noise became eerily quiet. Homes stood abandoned. Entire bloodlines vanished forever. In many regions, there were simply not enough people left to maintain normal society. But strangely, from this catastrophe came enormous change. Because laborers had become scarce, surviving workers suddenly gained value. Peasants and craftsmen demanded higher wages and better treatment. Landowners struggled desperately to replace dead workers. For centuries, Europe had operated under feudalism, a rigid system where peasants worked land owned by nobles in exchange for protection. The Black Death weakened that system dramatically. Survivors now had bargaining power. In some places, workers moved freely between towns, searching for better opportunities. Governments attempted to freeze wages and control labor, but social tensions continued growing. The balance of power slowly began to shift away from traditional feudal elites. The plague also changed medicine forever. Although medieval doctors still misunderstood disease, the disaster forced cities to develop new public health measures. Some ports introduced quarantines, requiring arriving ships to remain isolated for 40 days before passengers could enter. The word quarantine itself comes from the Italian word times quaranta, meaning 40. People slowly began recognizing the disease could spread through contact and proximity, even if they didn't fully understand why. Art and culture transformed as well. Death became a dominant theme in paintings, literature, and religious imagery. Skeletons, graves, and symbols of mortality appeared everywhere. The famous Dance of Death artworks reminded viewers that plague spared nobody rich or poor, king or peasant. The psychological scars lasted for generations. Even centuries later, the Black Death remains one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. A disaster carried by trade, fed by fear, and amplified by ignorance. Yet it also reshaped civilization. It weakened old systems, changed economies, transformed medicine, and forced humanity to confront how fragile life truly is. Today, historians still study the Black Death, not only because of the unimaginable suffering it caused, but because of how deeply it changed the course of history. It was more than a disease. It was a turning point for the entire world. Because in the 1300s, death didn't knock at the door. It walked straight through the streets. I'm Mohammed Samyun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.